For more than a century, the Panama Canal has been the world's most important shortcut, a lifeline for international shipping. But when droughts and traffic jams brought it to a standstill back in 2023, one unexpected country stepped in with a bold plan. Mexico unveiled a $270 billion project that could rewrite the rules of global logistics, and it's already working. So, let's have a look at this project, what it's all about, and why this project is on track to become one of the most ambitious infrastructure projects on Earth. Let's dive in. Back in 1907, Mexican President Porfirio Diaz did something remarkable. He built a railway across the Isthmus of Tehuantepec, the narrowest stretch of land connecting the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. For 7 glorious years, cargo flowed across Mexico while the United States was still struggling to dig through Panama. Ships would dock on one coast, their goods would hop onto trains, and within hours they'd be on the opposite side, ready to sail again. Mexico was the bridge between two oceans, and business was booming. Then 1914 arrived, and everything changed. The Panama Canal opened its massive locks, and suddenly Mexico's railway looked like yesterday's technology. The numbers were brutal. Cargo volumes on the Mexican railway crashed by 80% in a single year. Within a decade, the tracks were rusting, the stations were abandoned, and the dream was dead. The Panama Canal became the undisputed king of global trade, and Mexico became a footnote in shipping history. But here's the thing about ambitious projects. They have a way of refusing to stay buried. Fast forward to 2018, and President Andrés Manuel López Obrador stood before the Mexican people with a bold announcement. He was bringing back the Interoceanic corridor, and this time it would be bigger, faster, and more powerful than anything his predecessor had imagined. The government committed $5 billion to resurrect what the world had forgotten. When construction kicked off in 2020, Mexico didn't mess around. Crews ripped up century-old tracks, cleared decades of overgrown vegetation, and laid down fresh steel rails. But there was a problem. A private company owned a crucial section of the old railway and wasn't interested in selling. López Obrador's response? He sent in the military to seize it. Controversial doesn't even begin to describe the move, but it sent a clear message. Mexico was deadly serious about making this happen. The project wasn't just about fixing old tracks. Mexico planned to build 3 major rail lines spanning over 1,000 kilometers, construct parallel highways, and develop brand new deepwater ports on both coasts. The goal was simple but revolutionary: create a multimodal transportation corridor that could move cargo faster than the Panama Canal. And by December 2023, the first passenger trains were already rolling across the isthmus, carrying tourists through jungles and mountains from the Gulf of Mexico to the Pacific in just a few hours. What drives a country to spend billions reviving a project that failed spectacularly a century ago? The answer lies in what was happening 1,800 kilometers south in Panama. The Panama Canal has moved over 500 million tons of cargo annually for decades, with more than 10,000 ships passing through its locks every year. But in 2023, nature delivered a wake-up call that nobody could ignore. A severe drought, the worst in Panama's recorded history, caused water levels in Gatun Lake to drop to dangerous lows. The canal needs 50 to 52 million gallons of fresh water for every single ship that passes through, and that water comes from the same lakes that supply drinking water to millions of Panamanians. The Canal Authority had no choice. Daily transits were slashed from 38 ships down to just 24. LNG shipments plummeted by 66%, and dry bulk cargo dropped by 107%. The backlog became so severe that shipping companies were paying up to $4 million just to jump the queue. Think about that number for a moment. Companies were willing to pay $4 million not to use the canal, but simply to use it sooner. The desperation was palpable, and the global supply chain was feeling the pressure. The worst part? This wasn't a one-time crisis. Climate scientists predict another drought event around 2027, which means Panama could face the same nightmare all over again. The Canal Authority announced plans to build a $1.6 billion dam to secure future water supplies, but it won't be ready until 2032. That's 7 years of vulnerability. 7 years of uncertainty, and 7 years of shipping companies desperately looking for alternatives. There's another problem the canal can't engineer its way out of: size. Modern cargo ships have been growing larger and larger, and many of these megaships are simply too massive to fit through the Panama Canal's locks. Even after the 2016 expansion, these giants of the sea have to choose between waiting weeks for canal access or sailing all the way around South America, adding thousands of miles and enormous costs to their journey. Every crisis creates an opportunity, and Mexico was watching Panama's struggle with intense interest. In March 2025, Mexico dropped a bombshell that caught the attention of every shipping company on Earth. The government announced a staggering $7.5 billion investment to supercharge the Interoceanic corridor. But that figure barely scratches the surface of what's really happening. When you factor in the $4.5 billion already secured from 52 private companies, plus the projected economic impact from industrial development, job creation, and multiplier effects, analysts estimate the total economic transformation could reach $270 billion over the next decade. The infrastructure build-out is genuinely impressive. Mexico is modernizing 1,200 kilometers of railway connecting 4 major ports across 4 states: Veracruz, Oaxaca, Tabasco, and Chiapas. The port of Coatzacoalcos on the Gulf of Mexico is getting a massive upgrade, with its dock extended from 270 meters to 400 meters and specialized container terminals being built from scratch. On the Pacific side, Salina Cruz is receiving similar treatment, transforming from a regional port into a world-class shipping hub. But Mexico learned something important from Panama's century of dominance. Infrastructure alone doesn't guarantee success. You need to give companies compelling reasons beyond just geography. That's why the government created 10 industrial parks called Development Poles for Well-Being, strategically located along the corridor. These aren't just empty plots of land. They're fully equipped industrial zones with power, water, telecommunications, and most importantly, massive tax incentives. Companies setting up operations in these zones get 100% income tax exemption for 3 years. After that, they still enjoy a 50% to 90% reduction for another 3 years. Value-added tax, waived, import duties on equipment, gone. The government is targeting high-value industries like semiconductors, pharmaceuticals, automotive manufacturing, and clean energy. Taiwan's semiconductor manufacturers have already expressed serious interest, seeing the corridor as a way to diversify their supply chains away from geopolitical hotspots. Mexico has a secret weapon that drought-stricken regions can't match: water. Lots of it. While northern Mexico struggles with water scarcity, the southern states along the corridor have abundant rainfall and rivers. Officials proudly state, "We have excess water," which sounds almost provocative given Panama's struggles. The corridor can meet an estimated 10% of demand for the U.S. East Coast and Midwest, positioning Mexico as a critical link in North American supply chains. The timeline is aggressive but achievable. Full operations are scheduled to begin in the first half of 2026, meaning companies will have a fully functional alternative to the Panama Canal in less than a year. 79 municipalities home to 4.6 million residents, 60% of whom currently live in poverty, stand to benefit from an estimated 500,000 new jobs. The blueprint is on the table, the money is committed, and construction is racing forward. But talk is cheap in the shipping industry. Companies needed proof that this wasn't just another expensive government fantasy. March 2025 provided that proof. When those 900 Hyundai vehicles made the 9-hour crossing from Pacific to Atlantic, they didn't just move cars. They moved the entire conversation about global shipping. The 15% cost savings and 5-day time reduction weren't theoretical anymore. They were real, measurable, and impossible to ignore. Shipping executives started doing the math on their own cargo routes, and suddenly Mexico's corridor wasn't a curiosity anymore. It was a legitimate competitive threat to Panama. The European Union clearly thinks Mexico is onto something big. In a move that signals major geopolitical shifts, The EU included a maritime corridor between Coatzacoalcos and Sines, Portugal, in its Global Gateway initiative. This isn't charity or goodwill. This is Europe hedging its bets and building redundancy into supply chains that proved dangerously fragile during the pandemic. Mexico is offering reliability that the drought-prone Panama Canal simply can't guarantee. Taiwan's semiconductor industry is watching closely because the Interoceanic corridor offers something beyond speed and cost. It offers geographic diversification at a time when tensions between the United States and China are making companies nervous about concentrated supply chains. Setting up manufacturing in Mexico's industrial parks means products can reach both American and European markets without transiting through geopolitically sensitive waters. But Panama isn't just watching while Mexico builds this alternative. By early 2025, rainfall returned, water levels recovered, and canal transits increased by 25%. The crisis had passed, at least temporarily, but the vulnerability had been exposed, and shipping companies have long memories. Panama's ambassador tried to downplay the competition, calling the routes complementary, not competing, which is diplomatic speak for "we're worried but trying to stay positive." By 2028, Mexico's corridor is projected to handle 300,000 containers annually. That's nowhere near the Panama Canal's 14,000-plus ship capacity, but it doesn't need to be. Even capturing 5% to 10% of Panama's traffic would represent billions of dollars in economic activity and establish Mexico as a permanent player in global shipping. The corridor gives oversized vessels that can't use Panama a viable option. It gives companies nervous about drought a backup plan. It gives manufacturers looking to nearshore production to North America a ready-made logistics solution. So, what's your take on Mexico's bold move? Do you think the Interoceanic corridor will actually challenge the Panama Canal's dominance? Or is it just a backup option? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this deep dive into global trade, smash that like button and subscribe to our channel for more fascinating stories about mega projects shaping our world. Until next time, stay curious.